When I had tested my growth hormone level was that of an 80-year-old. I had also had adrenal fatigue at that time. I had a big period of stress, and it left me quite low in every hormone. And I was young. I mean, I lost my menstrual cycle and everything. And so I wanted to try to optimize all of my hormones. I actually went on to some hormone replacement at that time too, even with some progesterone, a low level testosterone even, because my testosterone was so low. I started to use a combination of peptides called CJC 1295 and ipamorelin. These work together, again, to hit two different receptors at the pituitary and hypothalamic level to tell your body, make more growth hormone and release it. In about a month, my body composition was back to where I wanted it to be. I think I had about 10 pounds to get back to my normal body weight that I was before, even though over a couple of years I had tried to get, back to a normal body weight.
Welcome to the Fruiting Body Podcast with your host, Brendan. We are live in Phuket, Thailand. We got another absolute banger of an episode. Today we got Nikki Stewart, and guess what? We're going to be talking everything peptides. But the number one thing you're going to get from this is longevity and how to biohack you. Now I'm going to pass this over to Nikki. She's going to tell you that deep stuff, those golden nuggets you can expect to get from this podcast. Nikki, what did we discuss here, and what is the major takeaway that we can give back to that audience?
The major takeaway is don't guess, test. Make sure that you're working with someone that knows how to interpret your results and knows how to give you a really solid plan of how to maintain good health for a lifetime.
Yes. So we're not going to go too deep right in this teaser. If you want to know who we are, Fruiting Body Podcast is Fruiting Body Mushrooms. We're a medicinal mushroom company on the island of Phuket. We're doing lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps stuff. This is the best stuff. We're the number one in the country. We're going Singapore, USA, Vietnam. We're taking over Southeast Asia. So do not forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and let's go. Okay, you saw that intro is absolutely insane. This information, no one else has it, not only in the world, but in Thailand. So we're going to be revealing that all to you. But first, we are going to go through my health check and all the underlying issues clearly that I have, not just in the stomach, probably in the head as well. Without further ado, we're going to get it started with Nikki Stewart, and we're going to start quickly with your backstory. We have that similar connection to Dr. Lodi, but first, let us know a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how did you get into this whole health check and peptide world?
Sure. I'm from the United States, and I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse over 20 years now. Sounds long. And I came to Thailand in 2015 because I worked with Dr. Lodi. And I worked with Dr. Lodi in his clinic in Arizona for about 8 years. And he said to me one day, I need you to move to Thailand. I'd been coming here for just short term since like 2012 to set up clinics in Chiang Mai and then Bangkok. And then in 2015, it was, you need to move there. And I asked him something, and his response is something I'll never forget. I said, Dr. Lodi, how am I just going to up and move my life and my children and everything to Thailand? And he said to me, just imagine it.
And it was that easy.
And then 2 months later, I was here. Yeah, I'd never been to Phuket before. I'd been to Thailand, so I kind of knew what to expect there, but not Phuket, and I actually was imagining, okay, where would my kids go to school? Where would I live? And I found a place on Naiton Beach because the reason that I came here was to set up the clinic at the Life Co. And because Dr. Lodi was doing the integrative cancer program there, and it was just an empty room. So I had to turn it into a clinic, find the nurses, train the doctors, get everything set up. And I found the school, at the time was called Phuket International Academy. Now it's called UWC, United World College. And so about a year into my time at the Life Co., I started talking to the owners of Thanyapura because Thanyapura was connected to UWC. And we got to know each other, and they started to understand what I was doing over there. And they said, hey, can you help us here? Can you help us do that there? So I was really lucky because I ended up taking a job at Thanyapura, which allowed for my children to study at UWC and stay here. So it's been almost 10 years. I'm no longer working for Thanyapura. I still consult for them and help them. It's still really, to me, one of the best places that you can go to for your health in the island.
Yeah,
it's original.
That's where I guess you would have originally been connecting to your clients and whatnot, and taking that business to the next level of what you've done now.
Yeah.
Talking about like the Dr. Lodi side, I mean, you probably then may have seen one of our first podcasts we would have done with him, which was pretty new into this whole podcast. He probably would have been the episode definitely sub 20.
Yeah.
So you saw Lodi come on. Now that was over at the other studio. Are you still working with him as well? I mean, he is a genius. The information he has, it can be quite alternative. Other people may argue it. What was it like working with him?
Great question. I'm lucky because I had the most amazing mentor. You know, for all those years working with him, it changed my life dramatically. You know, we're trained conventionally as nurses to think one way, and doctors too, you know, and so working with him changed the way that I thought about medicine completely. So I'm really lucky because I use all of that knowledge now in terms of how I help to manage healthcare programs for my patients and guide them through mostly the lifestyle end of it, because Dr. Lodi really understands the connection between lifestyle choices and how it relates to every type of chronic disease, not just cancer, you know, and so that information was so valuable to me. And that really kind of led me down this path to understand, like, why do we get chronic diseases in the first place? I mean, we get some bit of that, you know, of course, as we're trained, but to understand that connection between lifestyles. So I love that opportunity to work in Tanyapura more on the preventative side, because we would see mostly well people there. So yeah, that helped me understand how to manage, you know, all the lifestyle part, really looking into like, how do you sleep? Not just how do you sleep, but like what time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up? You know, what diet are you having? You know, how are you exercising? How much or how little, right? How intense? And how's your stress?
Would you consider it, or could you pigeonhole it as like a holistic approach? Is that the better way to describe it? Because I feel like Dr. Lodi describes it a little bit different.
Like more integrative.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I would say sometimes the word holistic kind of sounds a little bit
woo-woo,
like, yeah,
pseudoscience.
Yeah, exactly. But I think integrative approach really means that you're sort of taking the best of every modality in terms of medicine. And that's something that Dr. Lodi does really well in terms of understanding how to manage his patients. So yes, I'm still connected with Dr. Lodi, of course. He's like still my mentor and still like a father to me. If I have anything going on in my personal health or with my children, I contact him to ask him his opinion about it. And I still really closely follow what he's doing with medicine as well, with cancer treatment particularly. And so, yeah, he's a fond friend of mine and colleague for sure.
Yeah, he's kind of built in both the holistic, the Ayurveda. He's like, how do you pronounce it? Ayurveda? Mm-hmm. He's brought this all together, because I remember when he came on the podcast, I'm like, I actually have to do research for like 2 hours. Otherwise I have no, so I learned so much just preparing for him, and being able to hold those conversations with him. And then he can just go off on his tangents. Very technical as well in that sense. When you were deciding to, again, you've went over to Tanyapura, you're dialed into Phuket, which is always a bit of a challenge at first, and even integrating into the society here and building that community. How did you get into kind of taking off and going on your own path?
That was a big leap, that's for sure. But it was right around COVID, actually, when the pandemic started, that I was almost forced into that. You know, when we actually had new ownership in Tanyapura, and they were really lovely and supportive, and, you know, said like, look, you know, we want to keep you, you know, but it's just these are difficult times, and we have to make some changes. Could you still help us? You know, so we had a pretty good transition out of there. But I had already started to think about how I could do something with supporting patients through, you know, teaching them how to live healthier lives, and, you know, really putting everything that I learned together into creating true healthcare. And I became really interested in also some therapies around peptides at that time. I started learning about one that was particularly helpful for cancer, actually. And I ran that by Dr. Lodi, and we started to understand the connection between how these really small molecules can help turn things around for people in so many different aspects of health, you know. And so I kind of had the time because of the pandemic to really study and kind of go down that rabbit hole. And that was a really great time for me, because it gave me the space to open up and to understand how I could really, you know, manage to stay here in Thailand, because I'm really committed to being here in Thailand, and particularly, you know, having my children study here. I think what a great opportunity for them versus how it might be for them if we were still in the States,
yeah,
of course. And I love the culture. I love the people here. I love everything about Thailand. It's
I think
a great place to live.
It's a big leap, especially a lot of people were facing those decisions of COVID. Do I stay? Do I go? How do I stay? What are my options? And I guess the only options, even for people like myself and yourself at that time, was like, well, I better build my own business. So I can build that foundation and that structure. I want to get into the whole part of how we connected, and it started with the knee, and we've done testing. We're going to share all my results, which is absolutely grotesque, but don't worry, we're going to be very public with them. Before we get into that, staying here during COVID, making those decisions, do I go back home? Was there a time where you may have been on the brink of maybe it's time to go, and how did you tackle that?
Never.
It's not even an option.
It was not even an option. No, this is home. Yeah, I didn't want to leave. I'm of course in a very happy relationship as well, and actually my husband was really integral in helping me to make that transition too. Just in encouraging me to do it. He would say like, Nikki, if you work just as hard, for someone else, if you did this for yourself, you could really do something great, so just take that leap, so I think I needed that encouragement because I was scared. I was scared, like, can I make it on my own? Can I, manage all of this on my own? And and of course having 2 kids to support too didn't, make things any easier, so I'm so grateful to him because, he was really my rock during that time.
Can you recall that first day you put the pen to paper and, you're making the business plan? What are we going to do? What are we offering? What are the services? How do I structure that? Can you walk us through that business process of first developing?
I think that was never just one day, that's for sure. I mean, it was days and, it just develops over time, doesn't it? And you start to think about what you really need. But it was pretty easy for me because I understood really what humans need, what people need, to really have a thorough healthcare program. And it's pretty simple. I mean, most of what I do really is helping people to understand how to live healthier lives just through their lifestyle. I took a longevity course actually not too long ago, and we realized that, through that course that about 75% of what we do for our health is lifestyle. So that hand-holding and that guidance, and also those specific recommendations, because sometimes, for example, someone might think like, oh, I just need to exercise. Well, okay, but where are you in your health right now, right? Some people have certain injuries, for example. That's how we connected, right? That might prevent them from doing the type of exercise they want to do. But also, as we took a deeper look, right, and I can bring up your case, for example, we might not want to be really pushing the boundaries in terms of the intensity of exercise, because some people have some underlying conditions like adrenal fatigue, for example, that might prevent them, or it might put them backwards. It's so easy to say to someone like, just start dieting and exercising, you're going to lose weight, or you're going to build muscle, or this. It's so much more complicated than that, and it's so much more individual than that. So yeah, I needed to know, what do individuals need? So of course, it's easy to find labs here. And I had some friends that own labs here that helped me to put together certain profiles that we could look at, that could give us that information. And of course, guiding people through where to find healthy foods here, that can be a challenge too, but there's a lot of great places here now that can support people, even just to make it easy for them. Like for example, Pure Prep. Counts your calories, counts your macros, if you needed to get into that. I'm not a dietitian, so I usually refer that out, if someone really needs that level. But just those basic recommendations are there. Yeah,
and we're diving more into now the biomarker side in terms of what are your hormone levels, what are those hormone levels, what are the optimal levels that maybe the standard medical governing bodies may recommend, but is that even real? Let's get into the whole side. We connected. I was having initially a knee issue, but at the same time thinking maybe I should do my blood work because I am doing TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, and some of the mentors that I've reached out to, they laughed at me. They're like, well, how many milligrams are you taking? I'm like, not much, maybe, I don't know. I think at the time it was like 90 milligrams a week. But they would just come to me. They're like, well, how did you reach that number? I'm like, I don't know. That's a TRT number. They're like, yeah, but the reality is if you don't have a baseline from the beginning, how do you even know what you should be taking? And we found out really quick because I had water retention, right? That I was just taking too much. Meanwhile, I felt I wasn't taking any at all. So let's jump into the testing side. Someone comes to you. They want a full profile. We need to walk through that. We need to analyze that. What is the first step on that connection? if they're coming into your business side and they want to get involved, what are you going to do for them first, and how are we going to walk them through that whole process?
Firstly, we need to know about the person. So I use the health questionnaire. In your case, we met, right? And I interviewed you to say like, okay, what's going on? How are you feeling? What time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up? How many bowel movements do you have a day? I mean, really like into it, right? We really got into the nitty gritty, but that information, the symptoms that someone is having is so important, as well as like, what's your history like? You know, how far back does stress go for you? You know, this is one of the things that I think is so overlooked in terms of health, right? The effect that stress can have. And really into like, okay, what supplements are you on right now? Are you, your history with using some testosterone replacement. And then I usually will pass that by. I work with a Thai doctor here, who has been a doctor for over 30 years, really understands functional medicine, and so we kind of come together to say like, okay, what are the appropriate tests for this person? Sometimes a blood test isn't enough. In your case, we were looking into also like some parameters around gut health. We were looking into any toxins that you had in your body, for example, heavy metals, and how does that interfere with your level of micronutrients. So we really wanted to do the whole gamut, like really understand in a more comprehensive way, because sometimes, we take a blood test, for example, and it's like just a snippet at that moment, and it doesn't give us really as much information, like how are you actually utilizing that nutrient? We'll look at B12, for example, and your blood level might look good or in the normal range, but it might also not be optimal. And then we also find out by doing the test that we did for you, like the urine organic acid profile. I love this test. This test gives us so much more in depth about how are you actually utilizing that nutrient, right? And also like there's not a good test for your gut that we can do with blood. And so we wanted to find out like, okay, do you have some overgrowth of bacteria or overgrowth of fungus? This is really important for people that are having gut symptoms.
And you can get that all from a urine test.
Yes, yeah.
You don't need to do a stool test at that level.
Some cases we do a stool test. There actually is a test here called a comprehensive digestive stool analysis. And usually we'll start with the organic acid test because it's more affordable. These stool tests can be quite expensive. But in the case of someone that's maybe already done those tests and they're still having symptoms in their gut, we might do that at the beginning. But for someone that we're just kind of trying to understand, okay, can we manage this through either some elimination in the diet, for example, or addition of certain nutrients or certain probiotics or good bacterias, or addressing things like fungus or the way the immune system is functioning. A lot of people, don't realize that our immune system has a massive interplay with our gut. And most of our immune cells, like 80% of our immune cells, are made in our gut. And so we have to sort of address it at the same time because it's normal to find bacterias. It's normal to find fungus in the gut.
So if we don't have that full profile, like the blood's showing one part of the story, but the urine tells the other side, and you're kind of putting this data together to kind of give a conclusion.
Yeah, they relate to each other, especially as it relates to hormones, right? Because we can look at your hormone profile and say that you're low in a certain nutrient, like thyroid is a great example of this, for example.
I think my iodine was quite low, and then
Yeah, I mean, if we would have just done your blood, we would have seen that, okay, your thyroid stimulating hormone was a little elevated, right? So that means that there could be some underfunctioning of the thyroid, or sometimes even it comes back in the normal range, but it's nowhere near optimal. So the doctor that I work with is very well trained to understand those optimal ranges because it's sometimes nowhere near optimal or nowhere near normal, right? And
who decides the normal range and the optimal range? Because I'm assuming the normal range is maybe a governing body, and the optimal range is we've done a little bit more research. How do these parameters exist?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like looking at a normal population, this is really sort of, but as Dr. Lodi would say, normal people die of heart attacks every 4 seconds, and you maybe don't want to be in that normal range, right? So optimal, definitely there's different ways to interpret results. And that's another really important part if you're going to have some blood tests done or any other types of tests, that the interpretation is done by someone that really understands that test and what are those optimal ranges and what to do about it. That's the other thing. We can look at it sometimes and be like, oh, you're good. And then you're still having symptoms. And also sometimes paper doesn't match the patient. And that's why that intake form and understanding really your symptoms and what you're experiencing is so important because that can tell us sometimes a lot more than actually what the paper is. And then there's a lot of other factors that might contribute into that. If we looked at the thyroid, for example, if someone's having a difficult time losing weight, and their thyroid sometimes look pretty close to normal on the paper, we can even go a little bit deeper to find out if they're having something we call like subclinical hypothyroidism, meaning you're having all the symptoms of this, but is there something that is preventing the actual normal function of that gland? So we can look into what we did for you, for example, the oligoscan heavy metal test. This is looking at a tissue saturation of heavy metals. Now, everyone has heavy metals, so it's never a surprise that we found aluminum, mercury, cadmium, lead, right? And more. But these are the ones that we talk about most in terms of its context of how it's maybe impacting your health, because they will interfere with the way that we absorb our nutrients, right? So for example, iodine is sometimes blocked by if you have a high level of mercury. And we get mercury, most of us in our age group have amalgam fillings. That's really one of the biggest source, right? Or even things like tuna fish, the big fish that eat the little fish, shark, king mackerel, these other ones. So if we eat those, they're saturated in their tissues. We also saturate it in our tissues, right? So we hold on to these and they accumulate as we age and of course with our exposures. And so that can block how we can absorb iodine, and iodine's necessary for the function of the thyroid. If you follow Dr. Lodi at all, he talks about this quite a bit, because the thyroid is this gland that's responsible for everything from our metabolism to our immune function, our hair, our digestion, right? So sometimes slow digestion can indicate the problem with the thyroid. Not always, there can be other things, but it's quite a mighty little gland, so just some abnormality in the way that it's functioning can cause a lot of different symptoms. So we want to know really like what's behind that. And then the urine organic acid profile also shows us, like, for example, mitochondrial function. This one's really getting into, some of the
cell reproduction.
Yeah, deeper stuff in terms of your energy production. And so, it's dependent, thyroid function, on good mitochondrial function too. So sometimes when someone has some reason that they don't have as good mitochondrial function, then we can optimize that and have better function of thyroid gland too. So there's so many different avenues and factors that we can consider when we look at all of those tests together. It's expensive. I mean, this is the downside to this, is to do all these tests together. You're probably going to spend around, anywhere between 35 to 40,000 Thai baht, on that initial set of tests. But you probably would do that once a year, sometimes even longer depending on your age, or just repeat maybe a portion of those. But when we just get like little bits, and we can work with anyone's budget, of course, we can take a small panel, for example, if we really think there may be something going on with hormones, and look at what's going on there as a start. And then make the suggestion like, okay, either things look good, they look normal or optimal, or, okay, there's something going on here, we need to look at a little bit further and make suggestions after. So you don't always have to start with that full testing. But that's what we did.
And you're not testing every other month. I mean, it's initial test, and maybe we come back 6 to 8 months later, we see where you're at. And by adjusting your sleep, your diet, your stress, and your way of life, let's say, if they can get you into optimal, maybe people are only coming back every 2 or 3 years instead.
That's right.
Yeah. And the reality is, I mean, people look at spending 20, 30,000 baht, but then they'll go spend that at a beach club. So
easy.
I mean, so you got to understand where your priorities lie. I think the most interesting thing I took from this experience was specific to the DHEA. And I think this is for a lot of people out there, which I'll talk to people, I'm golfing with them, and I'm like, what supplements do you take? I take omega-3, and some will say I take zinc, and I take iodine, and maybe I'm taking a vitamin B complex. And from your information, I sit down with them as I have a cigarette and a beer, which is telling you how to live your life. No, but I mean, anyways. So I'll say to them, but how do you even know if you even need zinc?
Right.
Or do you need DHEA? And that's what came back to me. I was taking DHEA just because I'm like, well, it's good for you. It's good for your brain health. So go on Lazada, buy that. I need that, right? And then we did the test and realized my levels were beyond optimal. They were double of where we should be. So we went forward. We cut the DHEA pills out, retested the blood, which now it's much cheaper at that point because it's just one quick blood test. Results, boom, in one day. And they're back to an optimal level. So the point of that story is to people listening, and I don't know if, and I'll pass that to you if you would recommend that. Don't just go take iodine and zinc because it's healthy. If you don't know where your starting point is, you might not even need to be taking that.
It's so true. I used to love to just kind of loaf around and search on iHerb and read the benefits of things, and then just, next thing you know, try to order 3 or 4 things that I thought that I needed and probably didn't need it either, until I really started to understand how, it's so, you end up actually saving yourself money, when you take the things that you actually need and address those parameters. And sometimes, a lot of people will say like, oh, you don't need supplements, if you're eating well. And unfortunately, part of that's true. If you are eating well, you probably need less, or you're probably going to have better mineral levels. I've watched myself, even because I'm testing quite regularly, at least every year, if not every 6 months, on a lot of these parameters too, particularly around micronutrients. And I started to really pay attention about how those things changed over time. I always say you can't manage what you can't measure. Mm-hmm. So try to get a baseline and see where you're at, see what you actually need, and then measure again, to see, is it improving? And of course, like, there can be a lot of things that might interfere with how you have good levels of nutrients, like your gut, for example. If you're not absorbing things well in your gut, or if you don't have a good source of good supplements. Yeah. For example, I just asked you this morning, what brand of the DHEA were you taking? Because it was working. It was good.
Yeah, but that's an interest. Is there, now I would, no affiliate, I recommend Life Extension. I think they're one of the better supplement brands out there. Clearly the DHA was working. Yeah. And the reason for that is because, like we were discussing before, that they're authorized for all their products to sell in Singapore. And if all the countries in the world, banking, supplements, if you can't trust Singapore, who the hell do you trust nowadays? So, and I'm going through the process. We're opening a company in Singapore as well. The documentation I'm going through is insane. They don't play around. Yeah. Like other countries where you can kind of do whatever you want. Anyways, talking about, like, let's say, like, the negative effects of overdosing. I don't know if the over-optimal of my DHA levels. So my DHA levels were about 989, let's call it, and now we brought it down to like 485. Back to that optimal, but on the high spectrum. Are there any negative side effects of being double outside of that optimal level?
Yeah, I think that there can be, for sure, because DHEA is a hormone, right? It's actually, it's a supplement that you can buy in some, pharmacies around here and on the internet, right? But it's considered one of our master hormones. So in your case, it was hard to interpret because you were also using testosterone. You were taking infrequently some, also, lion's mane, right? And you were also taking some remedies here and there. Yes. Here and there, yep. Sort of as needed when you thought it was might help.
Oh, pure bro science. I'm like, I got water retention. I guess I need a Remedex.
Right. So, because what we expect with DHEA is that it can convert to other hormones, right? We consider a master hormone, DHEA and pregnenolone. From cholesterol, we make DHEA and pregnenolone, and these help to stimulate our other sex hormones, for example, like our testosterone, our estradiol, progesterone. So we don't really know, actually, like, if you were taking that, your progesterone was high, your estradiol was really like too low, right? Where things we see in men that even very low estradiol can impact libido, for example, can cause even injuries and things like this. So we want to have an optimal level of estradiol. And you were using testosterone, so it was hard to know, actually, had you just been, using the DHEA without using any of those other hormones, would you have had good production of those other hormones? But we don't really know how it's going to metabolize. There's actually another test that is very good. It's not available here. You can order it, though, called a Dutch test. It actually shows how you metabolize your hormones. And that's, you mentioned to me earlier that you were using 90 milligrams of testosterone. I get this question a lot, like, oh, how much of this hormone should I take? Well, I don't really know until we know you. And even when you start taking it, how are you going to utilize it and metabolize it? Because our hormones are metabolized in different ways through the liver, for example. So someone might metabolize things completely different than the next person, so that's probably true that some people are going to get really great effect from a certain dose, and then someone's like, oh, I took that and I didn't really feel anything, so that's why I think it's really important to measure your baseline and to work with someone that knows how to balance hormones, because it's also not just like, take this one thing and everything's going to shape up. The hormones are like a symphony. And we're not just talking about our sex hormones. We have adrenal hormones. We have thyroid hormone, right? We have our upstream hormone production, like at the pituitary and hypothalamic level. And they control quite a bit of process in the body. So
Yeah,
it's
and
important not to mess with.
It's quite complicated in the sense where if the analogy is if your body is a dam and one is leaking, maybe you put a hole here but squirting out over there.
Exactly.
You can't. It's very hard to address and bucket everything into one platform there, especially on let's say the DHEA. We obviously addressed that makes sense. I was taking DHEA supplements, so we had to stop that, but now we still don't know, are my estradiol levels, are they still low due to the DHEA? So we still have to wait and maybe retest later down the road again to see if that's come down. Yep. Will they come down because we reduced the testosterone as well? I mean, now we're down to like 120 milligrams. And even that conversation I had with friends before saying 160, 180 milligrams, pretty much, I guess that would have been a week, 160 a week. They were like, yeah, that's still quite low, but it seems like I was absorbing it. I think I was at 1,200 or something.
And we don't know in the in context with the DHEA that you were using as well, and how that was impacting that, So, yeah, I think the important thing is just understanding your body, where you're at. And it's interesting, too, I was mentioning about stress earlier and the role that can play in its impact in hormone production as well. So we have to consider all of these lifestyle factors. Age, for example, is a big one, of course. What's your natural production like? What are the things going on that may inhibit the way that your body is producing hormones? There's so much to know. It's so individual. We could go down a rabbit hole.
As we discussed before the podcast, we're kind of going through this process of someone would approach you and here's the blood work and here are the next steps. We're kind of moving into the next phase on myself if I'm the specimen, let's say. As we move into that next phase, some of the options now become peptides. Before we get into the 7,000 different peptides, which we won't, let's just talk about first, what are peptides?
Okay, sure. And this is one of the things that we might, recommend to someone to use, depending on what their health situation looks like, what their parameters look like. Of course, alongside supplements, some peptides are even dependent on certain nutrient levels, so these are really the pillars. Like we want to look at, your lifestyle, okay, your hormones, your supplement, your nutrient status. And then peptides are an option as well. And there are, like you said, over 7,000 peptides that exist in the body naturally that we know about so far, much less in clinical use. And they're just short chains of amino acids. So a great example of this would be like growth hormone, for example. A lot of people are familiar with using growth hormone and
like, HGH.
HGH,
that would be considered a peptide as well.
It's a protein. So actual growth hormone, like if you're using a growth hormone injection that is, 191 amino acids, that's considered a protein. So said that under 50 amino acids would be a peptide. So there are actually growth hormone peptides that initiate a response at the hypothalamus or the pituitary that tell your body, make more growth hormone and release it. And they have a similar effect that they're going to improve levels of IGF-1, which is a blood test that we look to see what is your level of growth hormone. There's lots of different reasons why someone might want to use that. For example, particularly one of the most important ones that I find is sleep, actually. I think it's such a great thing that can help with sleep, even though there's so many other things that we can suggest to help someone sleep better, like melatonin, but it comes with some risks. And so it's important that you're, again, not just like going into the chemist to see, hey, do you have this? I want to try to use this. I wouldn't start there, right? Because there are some things that you need to know about, especially when using actual, growth hormone, because the dose needs to be adjusted correctly. Because it's a growth factor, right? So we don't know what type of growth are we promoting when we use that. Obviously, most people are using it to help improve, say, their muscle mass, decrease body fat, their hair, skin, nails. It's considered our fountain of youth hormone. And of course, true growth deficiencies. This is really what it's designed for. And so in certain countries, like you cannot get growth hormone because that's really what it is approved for. And so it's, I think, a great option to consider using something like a peptide if you are in a lower age group. For example, when I had tested my growth hormone level when I was probably around 37 years old, I think, because probably when the first time I started considering looking at that and looking into it, my growth hormone level was that of an 80-year-old. was like 107 or something, quite low, you know. I think yours was quite low too when we checked. And so I decided that I wanted to see how this would affect my health and affect my energy levels, affect my sleep, for example. And I had also had adrenal fatigue at that time. It was a time that I had a big period of stress, and it left me quite low in every hormone. And I was young. I mean, I lost my menstrual cycle and everything. So adrenal fatigue is a really tricky thing to work with people, because you have almost every symptom underneath the sun of feeling very fatigued. You know, you can have alteration in the way that your other hormones are functioning, weight gain, sometimes weight loss, low muscle mass, because stress is catabolic. You're going to lose some muscle mass for sure. So it's hard to build muscle. Yeah. So anyway, bloating, definitely some gastrointestinal symptoms, brain fog, significant brain fog that can come up with adrenal fatigue. And so I wanted to try to optimize all of my hormones. I actually went on to some hormone replacement at that time too, even with some progesterone, a low level testosterone even, because my testosterone was so low, because cortisol is the main stress hormone we talk about. There's other ones, but it starts to utilize your other sex hormones. And so that can really do a number on your hormone production. So back to the growth hormone. I started to use a combination of peptides called CJC1295 and ipamorelin, and these work together, again, to hit two different receptors at the pituitary and hypothalamic level to tell your body, make more growth hormone and release it. And so what I found was within about a month, my body composition was back to where I wanted it to be. I think I had about 10 pounds. That'd be about 5 kilos, right? To lose, to get back to my normal body weight that I was before, even though over a couple of years I had tried to get, back to a normal body weight. I could maintain my workouts in the gym. I felt really great. The recovery was really good. So I think that these are really great options for people, that have a great safety profile. Peptides also have a negative feedback loop. So you can't drive IGF-1 too high. So you don't run that risk of abnormal, growth of IGF-1 becoming too high, where say you could cause growth of abnormal tissue, for example.
Where does the term peptides come from? Now you're saying it's a smart chain, like sugars essentially.
Short chain of amino acids.
Short chain of amino acids. So, but the term itself, is there a story behind that, or is it kind of just everyone's adopted it now?
Actually, peptides have a long history. Even insulin is a peptide.
Okay.
Right. So peptides were discovered early in the 1900s, actually, but they didn't really become good at synthesizing or making peptides and making them stable into forms that were actually had a good effect in the body, because there's some weaknesses to using peptides, for example, that they're prone to hydrolysis. They, have relatively short half-lives in the body. Sometimes they don't really have an effect at all. When you try to use them from an exogenous source, for example, we know that we make them naturally in the body, but when you try to give them from another source, or they're not easily orally bioavailable, for example. So some of them are only available as an injection. But they're getting better at understanding how to modify those chains of amino acids. For example, some of them are, 15 amino acids, but they'll change the last 3, or they'll reverse the sequence, when they produce these. So they're a synthetic version of the amino acid that we make endogenously in the body. But yeah, so there's a lot of modifications that can be made to make them have better binding times at the receptors, or have even a completely different effect. And so that's how the development of peptides has really started, probably getting better since, I'd say the 1980s or so. But now we see that things like semaglutide, Ozempic, the drug that everyone's using for weight loss, this is a peptide.
Interesting. I think with the peptides and trying to understand that a little bit deeper, I want to get into the top 3 underlying issues that clients would approach you with, and maybe at that level, what peptides would work best for them. Now, we understand we cannot give blanket statements for everybody, but I'm sure there's a lot of cases, like say your FAQs, that are repetitive, and this comes up to the table. What is the number one that people approach you with? Is it weight loss? Is it sleep? Is it stress? And at that point, how do you address that and maybe point them in the right direction of getting the right peptide for them?
Great question. Yeah. I'd say weight loss is definitely a big one because a lot of people know about these compounds that are FDA approved here in Thailand and a lot of other countries around the world, like the Ozempic, for example, or Mounjaro, which is tirzepatide. So Ozempic is semaglutide, so it's a GLP-1, analog of GLP-1 that we make naturally in the body, and it works by delaying gastric emptying. So you feel full when you sleep or when you eat, and but it comes with some side effects. So again, I think the really important thing is finding guidance on how to use them, how to dose them appropriately, because you definitely, it's a once a week injection. You can have nausea for 7 days. You can have constipation, for example, or things that are really, even more serious like pancreatitis, so they come with some effects that are clearly, printed on the labels of those products that, as an approved drug is. And the difference between a pill and a poison, right, is the dose, right? So making sure that you're being guided on how to use the dose and dose those correctly, but those are very popular. So weight loss is definitely a massive one, or I would say body composition, because it's not always weight loss. Sometimes it's always fat loss. We want to lose fat and build muscle, and that really would be the goal for a healthy body composition, because we know that the more muscle that we have, the better chances for longevity, the better chances for less frailty as we age. Of course, we're dealing with, we call it age-related sarcopenia, the loss of muscle as we age. So maintaining your muscle is key for your health. It helps improve your insulin sensitivity. That's another issue that people sometimes don't know that they have, but we know as health providers that a lot of people are dealing with issues in terms of how they manage their insulin levels in the body. We call insulin resistance. This is a massive issue now. And of course, diabetes is becoming even more of an issue. So that's why these drugs were actually approved, was not just for weight loss, for diabetes, right? And so you can use them for those cases. And so insulin resistance is a big one. And of course, weight loss, they kind of go hand in hand. Inflammation. Mm-hmm. Is really the root of all disease. Which
I think that kind of leads into probably the next phase of what I would be getting into, because we had issues with the knee. The inflammation's okay, but maybe there's still an underlying issue that could be addressed. Obviously, it's a meniscus tear. The severity of that, not quite sure. Based on my paperwork and where we went from our discussion, and now we've tested the DHEA and we know where we're at, even as a benchmark client, we can have that open discussion here on the podcast live just for you guys. But what would be the next steps of a conversation you would have with a patient such as myself in this situation? What would we do next?
Well, we want to know kind of, okay, where are you at? What are the most important things that we can really address? And in your case, we're looking at, in everyone's case, what are those foundational things that really we can address first? Because I do get quite a bit of people that come to me that, are sort of in the biohacky space, which is cool. It's great. I think definitely doing it in a right way is important. But they want to do things that maybe are a little bit more energy promoting, for example. And I always take it back to like, okay, let's look at some of these things that are going on foundationally for you. How's your immune system functioning? How's your gut functioning? Do you have insulin resistance? Do you have inflammation, right? Because when we address those things in the beginning, and again, we're looking at you on paper. We're looking at your symptoms. So we're taking that all into consideration. Our doctor really understands how to interpret the results that you're having to know, like, okay, where is the priority? What can we address sort of in the first, let's say, 3 or 4 months of your program? In the suggestions that we make, what can we do to help to reduce inflammation? Improve the way that your immune system is functioning, improve your insulin sensitivity, right? And start to heal your gut, because most people have those things going on at the core. And then we can get into some of the more exciting things like, addressing cellular senescence or mitochondrial therapies, or kind of pushing the limits when it comes to building muscle, because most people need recovery in the beginning. Mm-hmm. In your case, I wouldn't have said, hey, Brandon, get onto the weights, and, because you had very low cortisol. Even though your DHEA was sky high, you had very low cortisol, right?
Which is saying low stress levels, essentially?
High stress levels, actually.
Oh, that's high. Okay.
Yeah, so you had a history of stress, and we always assess that. What is your interpretation of stress? And what is your history of stress, too? Because even though you're not having stress right now, for example. Sometimes long-term history of stress, which if you don't ask the person that, we don't really know, that person might not be able to handle stress as well. There's sort of that sensitivity that's always there. People that have early childhood traumas, for example, or significant stresses in their teens or even in their 20s or, or at any point, and then later on in life, the way that they manage stress can be less than if they hadn't had, those events. And so we have to look at all of those considerations before making those recommendations to you about kind of where to start, but there is that starting point for everyone. Okay. Like we're always doing things that are going to address those 4 factors, I would say. And
that little fly came over to you now.
Yeah, it was over by you.
These, you get them in Thailand, these little ones, and they go like, they tickle your nose hair. You're like, get out of here. And you can never kill, they're so small that
I think I just ate it.
Good, perfect. They're so small that they're impossible to kill. I don't know, as in a Buddhist country, but anyways, even if you clap them, they're just too small. There we go, protein for the day.
I definitely swallowed it.
Perfect.
I don't feel hungry anymore.
We're good to go. Sorry, we got sidetracked there. We'll jump back. I think you're talking about the 4 benefits, or
the 4 most common things
yes.
in someone's health, that we want to address. And that's kind of where we were with you is, okay, like besides, making some changes that we needed to make immediately. Doctor wanted you to address your testosterone level was too high, so we decreased that, right? It wasn't screeching high, but it could have been a little bit more optimal, let's say, so that we weren't looking into those conversions. Stopping the remedies because your estradiol was too low. And so from the hormone perspective, stopping the DHEA, right? You were already taking a lot of supplements. And so we just enhanced kind of what you were doing based on the results of mostly around the organic acid, because that gives us much better information about how you were actually utilizing the things that you were already taking. Right. And then, of course, as it came to the situation that you were having with your knee, we want to help you to recover. Right. And so there's a few things that were could have been helpful, that we were thinking about at the time, but we wanted you to follow up the DHEA, because if there's something that could be some, associated with some known risk, then we want to make sure that we rule that out and address that first before making suggestions for other types of therapies. Right?
Yeah, you were saying along the lines that DHEA could be a high level, could be showing, hey, you could have a brain tumor. You're like, but don't worry, you don't have a brain tumor. No. But at least to address there weren't any major underlying issues. Yeah, and by bringing it down, we could do that.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes even these things are benign. It's not necessarily like a cancer. But you did have a family history of cancer, and that was one of the things that you also said that you were concerned about, and so we looked at some tumor markers also in your blood work, right? And that's not the only way to address it. We mentioned that there was some other genetic tests that you could actually take a look at to see if you had that risk. And so, it's just working with you as an individual to say, like, okay, where do we start, And so, of course, the first thing that we did was talk about what were the lifestyle things that you could do immediately. These are the immediate changes that we can make, right? While we were putting together your plan for your nutrient replacement, and you were, sourcing some of the supplements even yourself. Even though, we work with the compounding pharmacy that can make them specific for what you need in a packet that says, open this in the morning, open this at night, you're done. There's lots of different ways to go about it. Since you already had a lot of supplements, we didn't go down that route for you, right? So we just kind of added in the ones that you needed, and then we waited, for your follow-up. So now that we know that, okay, probably that there's not really any significant risk, we just needed you to drop that DHEA, we will consider using some things that can help you with your recovery, because we know that still underneath, if you had a history of stress, we don't necessarily want to start pushing those boundaries right away. So you're golfing, you're doing exercise, your knees are already starting to feel better, so that's good. It maybe just need a little bit of time. I think you tweaked it back in December, right? Yeah. So, but there are other things that we can address. You're already sleeping pretty well, but you had a very low level of growth hormone, for example. So one of the things, like I said, that I did for myself was use a combination of CJC 1295 and ipamorelin if you want to try to improve your recovery, your muscle mass. These things can be very helpful.
This is HGH, or it's completely different?
Different, yeah. Although
and it stimulates human growth.
Right. So, we'll see a rise in IGF-1. But again, there's that negative feedback. So you won't see your IGF-1 go too high, which is good because we're going to get it to an optimal level. so that you get all those benefits of having better levels of, we don't really check growth hormone in the body because it's very transient, and we look at what we call IGF-1. The liver converts the growth hormone into IGF-1. And so we look at that level as a way to measure where you're at. And so we may optimize that. That helps with recovery, can help with sleep, can help with healing of tissues even in injuries. And so I think that's an option for you if that's something that you want to do. We want you to, you're already quite muscular, but we want you to maintain that. The more muscle that you have on your body by the time that you're 50 years old, the more better chance you have at living a better health span.
And you're going to hold it as well.
Lifespan and health span.
And I was telling you as well, like, I sometimes I indulge in sugars, but you said, hey, as long as if you're holding that much muscle, that's okay.
It helps with your insulin sensitivity.
So if I had like 10 kg less muscle, I might be diabetic today.
Yeah. It definitely helps with your insulin sensitivity. Yeah. That's for sure. That's one of the best things about having better muscle on your body, is that it's going to help the way that you manage sugars. And I'm not saying that, eat donuts or anything, for sure.
No, I try. I'm try to eat something more natural when I can, but it's not so easy.
Yeah, sure. If you're having sugars like fruit, for example, your body knows exactly what to do with that type of sugar. Even like, an indulgent thing for me might be a date with an almond stuffed in it.
Easy. Yeah,
I might dip it in dark chocolate, something like that.
We're getting way crazier than that. What about, we were also talking, and I think a lot of people may have the fear if they have a family history of cancers and getting into growth hormone, as it may stimulate the growth of the cancer. Is there any myths behind that? Is there truth behind that? And even someone like myself that would deal with that and would have that fear in the back of the head. However, maybe you guys would recommend a growth hormone. How can we ensure that could not stimulate the growth of cancer? Yeah,
it's a good question. And definitely something that I think any doctor would take into consideration before making those recommendations. Now, we know that we use actual growth hormone for true growth deficiencies in children, right? And in the long-term studies that we see on children, we see that they don't develop cancer, so the risk is probably quite low, but I still think that any doctor that you see is going to be careful about that, no matter how you look at it, because again, it's a growth factor. So they don't want to, run the risk that, patient X developed cancer and it's because of this.
So they just don't want it. They just kind of, like Dr. Lodi always said, it's half the time it's doctors protecting their own ass.
Right.
They don't want to be liable for making maybe decisions that have not been standardized in reading material.
Right.
And they cannot really go on those alternative paths.
Yeah, and I think the other important part would be measure it. See what your IGF-1 is doing, measure your IGF-BP3 to make sure that the binding protein is also rising. You're not getting too much of the free IGF-1, because that's where some of that risk can be noticed, and so I think the important thing is just work with a provider, work with a doctor who's going to guide you through the use of those products. Don't try to do it on your own. Some people don't even need it. That's the other thing that comes up, is like some people are wanting to use these because they hear about some of the benefits, and then we look and it's like, actually you have perfectly good levels to begin with, either testosterone or other hormones, and so it's like, why fix something that's not broke, right?
On the inflammation side, that could help also maybe with the long-term repair of the meniscus at a certain level. Now, some people will talk about PSP and stem cell, and obviously we have options on peptides specifically, and I am sure you see this injury all over. You got Bangtail Muay Thai and MMA, people having issues at jiu-jitsu, maybe shoulder injuries, tears here and there. Is there a specific peptide that can help speed up the recovery of ligament injuries or knee injuries?
Yeah, probably the most popular peptides actually that people talk about, that I think most people know about, the combination of both BPC 157 and thymosin beta 4, or a lot of people call it TB500. Right, this is a 43 TB500, TB500 is a fragment of thymosin beta 4. Thymosin beta 4 is a 43 amino acid peptide that we upregulate naturally when we have an injury. And we do so to help improve the way that our body can heal, because it aggregates our own stem cells to an area of injury to promote healing, but it also stimulates angiogenesis, so the formation of new blood vessels, so that we see better blood flow to the area, better oxygen delivery, of course, and it also stimulates what we call anti-inflammatory cytokines, so these immune cells that decrease inflammation as well. And the same is true for BPC 157. Although BPC 157 is a little bit different, has similar mechanisms of action. It's a 15 amino acid peptide that we make naturally in our gut, in gastric juice. Actually, they discovered it around the time that they were looking at Pavlov's dogs, you know, this experiment, they ring the bell and the dog salivates. This is how they discovered this peptide, actually. And we see that we make that peptide, it helps to repair the lining of the gut. So interestingly, there's so many studies on the oral dosing on BPC 157, but much less on the injection, which is what most people would use if they have an injury. And it works really well. You don't need to inject it even at the site of injury. I sort of discourage that because some people try to like inject their...
No, the stem cells, they know where to go.
Don't do that.
Stem cells are naturally aggregating to the injury.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the oral dosing though is really great for conditions like Crohn's or colitis, IBS, you know, things like this that some people run into, even just like gas and bloating, reflux, ulcers, these kind of things. People will try the BPC 157 as a way to help to reduce some of those symptoms and help to heal the way that the gut is functioning. So these are probably the most popular things that people want to use in terms of peptides for those types of issues, injuries for sure. But again, you're addressing inflammation because you're stimulating those anti-inflammatory cytokines, which normally you would consider doing as a course, meaning that some inflammation is good, right? I mean, this is how our body heals. It's just when we look at chronic inflammation, that's where the issue lies. When people, you know, come and they have like arthritis and, you know, things like this, that's more chronic in nature. That's when, you know, we maybe just course through these things to try to address, again, along with lifestyle, what is contributing to that overall inflammation in the body that's exacerbating those symptoms. So these are things that you can try alongside to help to manage inflammation in the body. I find that when people are using them for those cases, like a longer term issue like tennis elbow or something like that, usually that's like about 4 months later, oh, I felt really good when I was on that. My pain went down. I felt like, you know, I was improved. Can I try it again? Sure, because we're always addressing inflammation. We're always addressing the way our immune system is functioning because we're living on Earth. We're always getting insults from things that are creating inflammation or oxidative stress in the body, right? So I think it's important that we also know that it's meant to be coursed. You know, it's not something that you're going to stay on long term. Because peptides are also very reparative and restorative. So they don't need to be used oftentimes long term. I can use a neurologic peptide as a great example of that. When I had brain fog, I used quite a few different types of neurologic peptides to help to restore the way that my brain was functioning, and they had tremendous effect. In fact, like, it was one of the first things I wanted to start, you know, or to get my hands on, was to improve the way that my brain was functioning. I would go to work and be like looking at my laptop going, what am I doing? You know, or get lost going app to app on my phone.
Is brain fog as a term, is this brain inflammation or chronic inflammation in the brain? And what would lead to that?
Yeah, great question. Yes, inflammation in the brain, definitely. We can see that even when we do that urine organic acid profile. We can see if there is potentially some things that are, you know, creating more inflammation in the brain, or you're getting some of those metabolites that look like you could be having more neurologic symptoms. And things that can contribute to that are toxins, of course, you know. Things like poor sleep can create, you know.
What would be high biomarkers that could, okay, that's why you have brain fog. Like, we can clearly see on your charts, these specific biomarkers are quite high. What would they be?
We look for like quinolate. This is one of the ones that's in the metabolites in the urine that could indicate that, you know, there's some inflammation. And a lot of times, like, stress can be driving that too. We show on the urine organic acid test, like, your neurotransmitter production, which is maybe not one of the best ways to check it, but we can also see, like, is there low dopamine production? This is one of the things that we saw that can come up. We make our neurotransmitters in our gut. So sometimes if there's that connection of having poor gut health, we see that sometimes neurotransmitter production can be impaired. So serotonin, dopamine, some of these ones that are, you know, drive our mood really, so but we can also see if there's any metabolites that could indicate some inflammation in the brain too. And so one of the ones that I used that I really love is called CMAX. It's a nasal spray, and it stimulates neurogenesis and the formation of new neurons. It's actually an approved product in Russia. It's out of Russia, so a lot of people are familiar with that. And it helps you to focus. It helps you to improve your learning and memory. But one of the ones that I also used was called dihexa. And I would like telling the story because, I remember that you course dihexa like every other month. And in the third month, about halfway through the month, I stopped taking it because I felt like I didn't need it anymore. Not that it's stimulating, not that people sometimes use things like Adderall or Vyvanse to try to get some sort of cognitive edge, but those also have deleterious effects on the brain. Peptides actually can restore some of the, function when people use certain things that have that deleterious effect for the brain. And so, halfway through the month, I was like, I don't really need this anymore. I could see the things that I was studying and reverb it completely the way that I read it. It was really focused. I'm not using it anymore because I'm breastfeeding. And so I had a baby a year ago. And so I can't use something that is orally bioavailable. And so I miss it because I feel like I say less ums when I'm using it. But we see that this product was actually studied in people that have conditions like Parkinson's, for example, because of the reuptake of dopamine. So,
you can't use it while breastfeeding. Is it more that there's just not enough long-term studies to know the side effects that you can't risk it right now? Like, for all you know, it could be good.
Yeah.
So it's kind of... just not enough information.
There's really no data on it, as it is with most things with breastfeeding.
You don't know, can it lead to autism? Could it lead to this?
Yes.
Could it?
Yes.
Especially when the child's developing.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day, maybe it's going to make some super babies, and the next thing you know is all women breastfeeding taking this.
Yeah. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, these would definitely not be. And mostly, even certain supplements, you really need to work with your doctor, to make sure you have clearance on those products. Even if you're thinking about becoming pregnant, you would want to be really mindful about the things that you're ingesting around that time.
Is there any, let's say, when people are coming to you, that you're seeing more issues of expats or local Thais that are appearing more in Thailand compared to the US, and why could that be?
What would say it again?
Like, for example, maybe we're talking about Mercury. Well, we live on the ocean here. We're eating more fish here. We're eating more tuna. So is it possible that people living in Thailand, whether you're local or an expat, they have higher mercury levels than, let's say, someone from Idaho?
Yeah, great question. Yes, I do see this. Actually, I look for some of those common threads. I'm sort of a nerd. I like to look at people's lab results and understand where they came from and what they were exposed to and what things that they have going on in their life. We see like lead, for example, is high. I think a lot of people ride motorbikes here. And so I think that some of the exposures that they get with lead can be from like brake dust, for example, or, even pesticides. I mean, anywhere you go in the world,
constant construction around here.
Yeah, exactly. This is a tin. It can test for tin. So this was tin mining was popular.
It's probably still heavily in the waters. Water.
Yeah. I see tin in some people's results here. They just added that to the test so you can see tin levels. But I'm not really sure about the effects that tin really can have when you accumulate a lot of it. Because when it comes to heavy metals, we really only look at like
Alzheimer's.
Yes, a lot of them interfere with like the way your enzymes function in your body and your immune function, for example, overall. But the ones that we really pay attention to more are going to be like aluminum, because we know that can contribute to things like Alzheimer's. And that often comes with use of regular deodorant, for example. So change out your deodorant to a more natural deodorant. What else?
What about just cooking with tinfoil? Do you think that leads to
aluminum?
Okay, well, aluminum foil, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's say aluminum foil. Cooking with that, you think that can lead to...
I actually had a patient that had very high aluminum. She said, I cook everything in aluminum foil.
Do you cook anything in this? Cans. You touch it?
No, I don't. I actually, I'm pretty careful about it.
Cook a lot in aluminum foil.
But even like beyond heavy metals, when we talk about cookware, for example, like BPAs and things that we get exposed to, in that urine organic acid profile, we can also see beyond the heavy metal test that you did a separate test, we see things like plastics And you know, some of these things like that we're exposed to either from
Probably
water bottles and but not just that, like shower curtains when we get into our car, for example, paper receipts, like when you get a receipt, it has BPA on it, tin cans, like, and the lining of the cans, for example.
Just from touching it.
Yeah. So yeah, you get exposures to these things all the time. And that's the thing, like, I'm never surprised to see them when it's almost like, it's normal. Again, normal.
I wonder if there's studies, people that have stocking shelves in grocery stores for 20 years are higher in tin and lead and different, just because they're touching cans literally 8 hours a day.
Yeah, different exposures, like work exposures. I had a guy that worked in like a shipyard, and he had very high lead, and it was related probably to the fuel that they're using in those ships. Yeah, so different things can come up, you know, depending on exposures. But most of the time, it's, like I said, mercury, a lot of, you know, fish, for example, it's tuna fish, consumption.
So what do we do, especially, let's talk about high levels of lead, maybe probably from motorbikes, which most people could relate to here. How do we tackle that, prevent that, mitigate that? Because at the end of the day, we're still going to ride the motorbikes, but how can we reduce the lead in our bodies?
Yeah, when you're riding a motorbike, you could consider wearing a mask. I don't know how much it's probably going to, you know, reduce it, but actually some of the things that you can do naturally in your diet, for example, work like natural chelators, like cilantro, blueberries, chlorella, you know, adding these things into your body, sulfuric foods. This test also looks at your levels of sulfur. So if you have high sulfur, that's good because it works like a natural binder in the body to help to remove some of these heavy metals, or at least block them, right? So you can also do things like the cruciferous vegetables, which also are very anti-cancer, right? So broccoli, cauliflower, bok choy, kale, what else? Durian here. Durian's high in sulfur.
But then they're high in pesticides. Like broccoli is extremely high. So I know we'll wrap it up in a minute because we'll go for 3 hours. And I think I know we saved this information for the end. So maybe we'll make this the teaser at the beginning. For people, especially living in Thailand, they can relate to, like, again, things like your vegetables, like broccoli. So maybe we can use these to be tackling lead or chlorella we were talking about to help remove heavy metals as well. But let's focus on broccoli, for example, which is everywhere in Thailand. It's in your lotus. When we're preparing that, are you soaking it, let's say, in baking soda and water and vinegar prior to cooking?
You can. I've seen some evidence that, that can help to reduce it. But the thing is like, try not to get crazy about it because you'll drive yourself batty, first of all. The more fibers that you're having in your diet, the better that you're going to detoxify from those substances as well. I remember there was a time when I was working with Dr. Lodi and everything had to be organic. I mean, it wouldn't come in my house if it wasn't. And I was trying to find a red pepper one day. It was like organic and I couldn't find it. So I'm like, I'm not making this recipe. That's it, done. But I finally read a book and it answered this question in there, like, if you can't find something that's organic, or, should you just eat the non-organic? And the answer is yes. It's okay because the more fibers that you have, the more that you make efforts to detoxify. Sauna is a great example, a great reason to go to the sauna. There's a study, they see higher concentrations of heavy metals in sweat versus urine, which surprised me because when I worked with Dr. Lodi, we were always checking urine heavy metals, what your body is excreting, at that time, as a way to detect the levels of heavy metals. But sweat being a better chelator, better way to get rid of the heavy metals is pretty phenomenal. So exercise outside, don't turn the air conditioning on, go to the sauna, right? This can help. So just those extra efforts. It's not to say don't eat broccoli because we know that it's helpful. Don't eat vegetables. Remember, animals accumulate heavy metals in their tissues too. So that's a very concentrated source of metals and
if you're going to be
antibiotics.
Eating that, you're going to get it anyways. It's almost impossible. In the world we live in today, it's nearly next to impossible to avoid.
And this is the reason why to just like keep at it, to really look at where you're at. People say like, well, what's the best age to start? I do blood tests and heavy metal tests on my teenagers, right? To see where are they at, what are they exposed to, how are their vitamin D levels, how are their B12 levels, and look at from a nutrient standpoint, what are they getting? Because it's an ongoing, health is an ongoing endeavor, and so when you invest in that, you're probably going to have a better health span, throughout your life. And that'll result in better energy, better sleep, better libido, better body composition, and everything else. So this is really, I think, the best investment that you can make. Your health is worth gold.
Health is wealth.
Yeah.
I don't like repeating these things. How cheesy, but cringe. On a final note, I was having a conversation, obviously, with golfers. So that's pretty much my whole life now. Golf, podcast, work, eat, sleep. And they were discussing that they were noticing they had low vitamin D levels as a golfer, and they think it's most likely because they're wearing sunscreen. Is that true? Is that possible? If you're out golfing all day, but you're coated up in sunscreen, therefore you're not absorbing the vitamin D? That's one part of the question. The second part is all the sunscreens out there are poison as well. So naturally, what would you recommend as well? So kind of a two-part question there.
Well, you're asking the wrong person because I think I've converted to the Thai side. I want to stay fair.
Okay.
Because I don't want to get real Thai. I take vitamin D. But I think that there's really no great replacement for the sun. So you can expose the majority of your body. Don't upset your neighbors or anything by being out there totally exposed. But, if you can go in a short or something during the hours of 10 and 2 where you're actually getting the all spectrum of the rays.
10 and 2 is the best time.
Yeah, because
they say don't go out at 12.
Yeah, but you need to do it for just a short amount of time. You don't need to get a sunburn.
You're talking 10 minutes.
Depending on your skin. I mean, everybody has, right? Like you look a heck of a lot more tan than I do, for sure.
Until you see that part.
I don't know what your nationality is. Yeah, exactly. But depending on your skin, just some exposure can help. Not only that, but there's a lot of evidence that exposure to sunlight, especially even early in the morning, is great for your circadian rhythm. So going outside and, that's why when you go outside, your sunglasses, my eyes are hurting, right? We were talking about this, wearing sunglasses or not. So sun exposure is really helpful for more than just vitamin D. But if you're not exposing enough of your skin, or you're showering right away and you're not giving it a chance, or you're wearing sunscreen, and try to find maybe more natural versions of sunscreen because some of those chemicals can last in the body, right?
I saw some guy, he was making his own at home, and it didn't look that complicated. It was like coconut oil and animal fats.
Yeah.
And then rubbing it on, and it's almost like tallow.
Oh,
it's called tallow, and kind of just using that and putting it on, and it's all natural. But at a certain level, it's how challenging is that to keep making every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, good efforts, and in terms of aging your skin, sun exposure can definitely age your skin. So if that's a concern, then wear a hat, or wear a long sleeve or something like this. But check your vitamin D level.
Yeah.
Definitely is something that you want to optimize. I remember when I worked in cancer, oftentimes our patients would have extremely low levels of vitamin D.
Because they can't get outside, they can't get exposed.
Or they just weren't taking it, they never checked, something like this. So I think it's just an important thing to have a look. It's one of the best things that we can do to improve the way our immune system functions.
And I know a lot of people here in Thailand, and you wouldn't expect that, but they supplement vitamin D just because they don't want to be too exposed to the sun, which you would think we would all be exposed to the sun. I think the longer you live here, when's the last time you've been to the beach?
Oh, yeah.
It's the war. Like the last time living here in Phuket, I don't think besides having beers on the beach, that does not count.
Yeah.
But actually touching the water, laying on the beach, going to the sand, I don't know. It's got to be 6 months, maybe more. I don't know.
And it's so good, one of the most beautiful things about living here is the beautiful beaches and just being in nature. There's some evidence that being in nature is one of the things that contributes to longevity. So yeah, being out golfing, and so the social part of golfing. Now, if you can just cut out the
beers. Yeah.
The San Miguel.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to end it on that note.
We're done. I'm getting a lecture.
Yeah. No, I agree. We'll have 2 or 3. It's refreshing.
But initially, when you did and you reduced the amount that you were having, you said to me after we met, after a little while, after we did your first set of bloods, you had already lost a couple kilos.
It's purely the golf. I know it is. You're walking 10 kilometers, and I'm hitting it all over the place, so I might be walking 20. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, we will wrap it up. We probably went an hour 20.
It's okay.
YouTube doesn't like anything too long. Anyways, we could go for hours. And we can always come back and take it to the next level. So anyone out there, if you have questions and comments, leave all those comments so we can always have a follow-up podcast, and we'll also answer those in the comments as well. Now, before we wrap it up, I'm going to kick this camera, the big lensed camera, to Nikki. And if you could just let everyone know if they're looking to reach out to you, you can stare right to the audience. right into that camera. Let them know where they can find you, and we'll put all the links in the description.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Yep. You can find me at True Healthcare, and so it's True without the E. So my email is Nikki, Nikki at true.healthcare. That's it. No .com. Just that.
That's it.
True.healthcare. Nikki at true.healthcare.
Awesome. And we're going to put all those links as well in the description so you can reach out to her, especially if you're looking to get a better understanding of yourself and kind of setting those benchmarks so you know which direction to go, and don't be a lunatic like me and just take every supplement you can find without even knowing your levels. Okay, that ends another podcast with the Fruiting Body Podcast. So thanks a lot for watching, and we're out.